Welcome to the Metasced podcast. Today, our guest is Dr. Tom Pomeranz, a nationally recognized authority, trainer, clinician, and consultant in the field of services for people with disabilities. Over the last 45 years, Tom has conducted thousands of seminars and programs throughout the United States and Canada. His audiences praise his ability to combine information, humor, passion, and storytelling into an informative whole that does not just present the information, but really communicates it in a memorable fashion. Additionally, Tom is a longtime Metasced advisor who has been on our council since its inception. So I will pass it over now to Tom to get started.
Linda, thank you very much, and good day to everyone. I'm delighted to spend a few minutes with you talking about an extremely important topic. We are now in the throes of a major transformation and cultural shift in the IDD system. We are in the midst of a movement that is rejecting facility-based day programs where many individuals, as I think you know, historically have spent their day solely with other individuals with IDD, not having the opportunity to engage in employment or volunteering in fully integrated sites. The good news is we are in the midst of a transformation, and I want to take a few minutes talking about some of the key aspects of this transformation. You know, the shift is going to occur with us or without us. It is a paradigm shift. So either we will shift it or it will shift us. That's the bottom line. When we talk about this transformation or shift, it's important to recognize it's not a matter of the program shifting or the program, that day program being transformed. It is focused on each individual. Thus, the process necessitates that we assess, we evaluate, we understand the needs, desires, and dreams of each person who we support in order to assure them a meaningful day, a day that is within an inclusionary environment, if you will. And I'm going to spend a few moments talking about what is a meaningful day, what is an inclusionary environment. The dog has finally caught up with the car. Given what I just said, that we are moving toward people having a meaningful day, not just merely being recipients of supports, but rather giving and doing for other people. That's what volunteering and employment is about. Given that we are moving toward a time where all individuals will have an opportunity to spend that meaningful day in a community setting with other people who are very diverse. That is what we've always wanted. The dog has finally caught up with the car, right? Now that we're approaching that time, how do we deal with the skill sets that are needed by our staff? How do we obtain the resources that are needed for this most important transformation? I want to share this statement with you that comes from a newsletter called The Riot from a number of years ago, but it just so beautifully states one aspect of this transition. And it's written in the voice of the people who we support. Look, first off, we want to thank everyone who over the years helped to build the service system. Thank you. But here's the thing. Hey, come closer. Listen. A lot of what you built, we don't want. You know, institutions, sheltered workshops, group homes, we don't want any of that stuff. We want to live like other people, real jobs, real apartments, and homes of our own, boyfriends, girlfriends, a real community life. And here's another thing. We want to be heard. We want to make decisions about our lives. Now, who could possibly take argument with that statement? Beautifully stated, isn't it? Now, transitioning, as we talk about how we move from these facility-based programs, which are basically segregated environments for a huge percentage of all the people in day supports. They spend their day in a building segregated from the larger community, if you will. And as we talk about how we're going to promote opportunities for them to have a meaningful day, giving and doing for others through volunteering or employment, that's scary. There's no doubt about it, right? And I tried to identify a metaphor, something that we could all relate to in terms of facing something in our life that we have great concern about. And I thought, in some ways, this whole transformation is like becoming aware that you're going to have a child. You first find out you're going to have a child, especially the first one. It's exciting. You call your family, you call your parents, hey, we're going to have a baby. It's joyous, it gets us full of joy, right? And oh my goodness, I don't even know how to change a diaper. How in the world do I feed a baby? For many of us, we had little to no experience when we had our first child. So there's that sense of fear and anxiety. We barely have enough money to put food on the table to feed two of us. Where are we going to get the money in order to support, that third mouth to feed, if you will? But guess what? There's no turning back. And in many ways, the transformation process, once we get on that track and we make a decision to promote opportunities for each individual to have a meaningful day, giving and doing for others, to have a day where they are fully integrated in community settings around a variety and a diversity of people, there is no turning back. Given my age, and I remember back in 1961, when President Kennedy announced that we were going to put a man on the moon, President John F. Kennedy, in a speech right before Congress, announced that the United States established the ambitious goal, ambitious is an understatement, of safely sending an American to the moon before the end of the decade. He said at the time this goal was announced, NASA science employees had no idea. I mean, if you think about it, they didn't know really how we were going to put a man on the moon. We had never, attempted it before, right? But yet, they weren't saying, hey, the moon, it's 250,000 miles away. There's only 1/6 of the gravity on the moon. There's no air or water on the moon. And think about, where were computers in 1961? What was the status of computers? Not far afield from the abacus, right? But they weren't saying that it could not be done because, on July 16th, 1969, not that many years later, Apollo 2, Saturn V space vehicle lifted off with astronauts Neil Armstrong, Michael Collins, Edwin Aldrin, and the Kennedy Space Center landing on the moon occurred on July 20, 1969. We are not being asked to put people on the moon. We are being, and think about that, I can't even imagine what they were confronted with. We're being asked to transition people, taking them from segregated environments where they spend their day, in many cases, engaged in just leisure activities, recreational activities, or educational activities. And we're being asked to provide them and promote opportunities for a meaningful day, giving and doing for others. What is right is not always popular. And what is popular is not always right. I understand that for many parents, for many of the individuals we support, and certainly for many of our staff, traditional day programs where people spend their day in facility-based sites is popular. I'm sure for many folks, there's this feeling of, hey, it's not broken, why fix it? So it makes our challenge even greater when there's not a pervasive sense among staff, among families of, we really need to do something here. Because I'm not sure whether all of us are on the same page. In order to make this transition happen, and given, in my opinion, not everybody is on board, we must fulfill many roles. Whether those of you listening to this are direct support professionals, frontline supervisors, managers, administrators, or directors of day supports, we have to fulfill many roles. We have to be a cheerleader in the process. We have to instruct our staff on the skills that they were needed, because trust me, the skills needed in integrated settings are very different, far more sophisticated and demanding than the skill sets needed in a facility-based program. We must be apostles. People must have a belief in us that we can lead them forward. We have to have a vision. Remember, where there is no vision, the people perish. We have to be visionaries, help our staff understand, and families and the people we support, about what life can be like in these integrated settings. We must be drum majors, right? Enthusiasts, conductors of the symphony orchestra, making sure Everything is coordinated, and generals as if we're in charge of an army. So which role will you fill? I think we need to be in many of these roles at various stages in the process. From a DSP standpoint, I want to give you a bit of a warning, a heads up. We want to make sure that our staff, our direct support professionals, never feel during the course of this transition that they have been doing something wrong. Because remember, we have, as managers and supervisors, we've made the determination that facility-based programs were best. We taught our staff and hired them to work in these facility-based programs. And now we're saying, well, wait a minute, we need to now be providing supports in integrated settings where people are volunteering and employing. So we have to have a mantra that we can give our staff so that they're never having a sense of defensiveness or guilt about what they have been doing over the years. And here's the mantra: I am a good and caring person. I do the best job I can. Everything I do because I believe it's right. I've been trained to do what I do. My supervisor knows what I do, and I'm not violating any rules and regulations. The whole concept behind this mantra is I can do better. None of us should be defensive during this process. Staff have many legitimate concerns as to, and by the way, I've been involved in transitioning a very large number of day support programs over the years and worked with scores of agencies throughout the country. And what I commonly hear from staff in the process of transitioning is a explanation, and I don't know, I'm using the word explanation, it's almost a defensiveness as to why we shouldn't change what we're doing. So you may hear staff saying, some of these individuals, their parents are poor and they can't afford to take them to the movies. Well, you hear that from staff where day programs take people to the movies, or they show movies in their day program. Or his parents are elderly and they can't take him to the zoo, and we try to do a couple trips to the zoo during the course of the year. His parents don't have a van and with a lift, and he uses a wheelchair. He really loves going to the mall, and his parents can't take him to the mall. That's why we take some of these folks to the mall. His parents are really busy and they don't have time to take him to the circus. That's why we do an annual circus activity, which, by the way, we may not be doing anymore because circuses don't exist the way they did. Or his parents live in a geographically remote area and he likes to go bowling and they can't take him bowling. I'm sharing this with you because these points are true. I mean, they're correct for many people, but we can't allow that to be the justification why we deny adults an opportunity to have a meaningful and productive day where they are employed and where they're or engaged in volunteering in a fully integrated site. I'm not arguing with the validity of these points. I'm saying we can't use that as a justification to not transition. Okay, here we go. This is the key point. The transitioning of traditional day supports for individuals with IDD is a two-pronged, complex concept. It necessitates, this really is very straightforward. The explanation of what the transition looks like is not complex. I will tell you, making it happen, since it's driven by the needs of each individual, is very challenging. It necessitates that all participants engage in a meaningful day, preferably employed or volunteering. And that's asking a lot for those of you who support people who are very physically involved or cognitively extremely challenged or have some very serious interfering conduct. I know that's not easy. Supporting individuals who have that level of needs, quite honestly, is easier done in a facility-based program rather than a community-based program. That's why training of staff is so critical. Let me clarify a little further here. In terms of a meaningful day, what we're looking for is the expenditure of meaningful effort. Simply stated, if the person you have doing it wasn't doing it, you would have to hire somebody to do it. For purposes of our discussion, that's how we are defining the word meaningful, right? Now, there's many things that people do in life that are important. They're valued, but don't fit the definition of meaningful. Last evening, my 3 daughters took me out to dinner to celebrate my birthday. Oh, I so appreciated it. I valued it. It was important to me. I would feel that I was really missing something if we didn't engage in this, annual activity of them taking me out for my birthday. But it wasn't meaningful, because if I couldn't do it, I wouldn't have hired somebody to go out with my daughters to take my place. So for our purposes, the definition of meaningful is if the person you had doing it wasn't doing it, you would have to hire somebody to do it. And that's fine. You may not like my definition of meaningful, but then you have to come up with one that everybody within your organization will agree to. What is meaningful? So when was the last time you saw a classified ad for 2 professional peggers? Sometimes in day programs, you see people putting pegs in boards or rings on sticks or beads on strings. But by definition, that's not meaningful, because you wouldn't hire somebody to put pegs in a pegboard. Wanted 2 people to pound pegs in a square pegboard. Interested parties, please call 999-11111. Right? Yeah. No. Now, I'm not saying that people can't learn new skills by putting pegs in a pegboard. You can improve your pincer grasp by hand coordination, attention to task, sequencing, color matching. There may be functional aspects of putting pegs in a pegboard, but it doesn't meet our definition of meaningful. And I know that concept can be difficult to grasp. Here's a wonderful quote from Sarah Estes, Agenda for Real Life. She says, "Until we realize that adults with intellectual disabilities do, in fact, have real adult needs, interests, and concerns, we will continue to treat them as if they are children and waste their precious time." And the men and women who we support are not children in adult bodies. They are adults. We want them to be respected by the larger community. We tend in our society to respect people who give and do for others, not just people who take. The purpose of life is a life of purpose. I really believe that. Now, obviously, this is my opinion. I believe the purpose of life is a life of purpose, giving and doing for others. I also believe all of you believe that, because those of you who are listening, you have a life as professionals of giving and doing for others. You wouldn't be doing what you're doing if you didn't believe it. They don't call them consumers without reason, right? And in some states, the people who we support are still referenced as consumers. And think about the word to consume or to take. Being an adult is a bilateral process. You have to know how to give as well as receive. The people we support have primarily been on the receiving end of giving, and in my opinion, far too long. So again, the second component of this 2-pronged process, all participants must experience an inclusive day. And not just an integrated day. Integration suggests a physical presence, being around other people other than people just like yourself. Inclusive means that I now have the opportunity to form valued relationships with them. I'm interacting with them. Just taking a group of people to a mall, that's an integrated activity. But I don't know. I didn't meet many new friends at the mall, right? So just taking people to the community does not mean that is an inclusive type of activity where they can form meaningful and valued relationships with others. So let's take a look at some considerations of folks being isolated. Individual competence is obscured by aggregating individuals by their disability. I even work with agencies where they refer to their program or the facility as a behavior program or a program for people that with profound intellectual challenges. Well, when we label the entire program like that, it obscures the fact that some people within many people, are very capable and competent. They're not all the same. Grouping amplifies the disability common to each individual in the group. Assembling individuals by those holding power over them, support staff, managers, families, volunteers, etc., is commonly justified by that is their choice. How many times have I heard people say, well, the reason he's in this program is it's his choice. How could it be a choice when you have an option of one? And for many of the people who we support, they don't have informed consent. They don't understand how volunteering can improve the quality of their life. Many of them don't understand how being employed and earning money can alter the quality of their life and how it alters how other people see them. So just merely saying it's their choice is, I believe, a cheap shot in many cases. Is being grouped with individuals of the same disability a choice, as I just said, when no viable option is presented to mingle and interact with a diversity of people? When an individual's disability is the determining influence for grouping, and that in essence described facility-based programs, it limits opportunities to develop the myriad of relationships realized through integrated educational, employment, leisure, and volunteer activities. These outcomes, the two outcomes, again, having a meaningful day, giving and doing for others, being employed or volunteering. And I want to make a quick comment here. If I had my druthers, everyone who we support would be employed. Everyone would be employed, regardless of the level of ability, skill, or competence that they have. In many cases, some agencies are not in a position to make that happen for a variety of reasons. So our fallback position is volunteering. And at least the person is in a role that is a valued role, volunteering. So these outcomes must be realized regardless of the individual's intellectual, physical, medical, psychological, or psychiatric challenges. With that, I want to thank you. I hope I have helped you create a vision of what life can be for the men and women who we support. Have a good day.